My son sold our family farm while I was lying in a hospital bed dying. I'm Thomas Anderson. For my entire life, I thought I had raised an honest man. I believed I had instilled in him the values of hard work and respect. But Brandon figured he'd inherit everything anyway, so why bother waiting? He had vacation plans with his wife, expensive tastes, and a dying father, who in his mind, would never know the difference. What he didn't know was that his simple dirt-covered farmer dad had a few secrets of his own. Secrets worth approximately $485 million. When I finally found out what he'd done, I didn't yell. I didn't threaten him. I made a few phone calls. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is a story about family, disrespect, and what happens when you brutally underestimate the wrong person. It all started 3 months ago when my heart decided to abruptly remind me that I'm not nearly as young as I feel. June 15, 2024, Providence Medical Center, room 314. The last thing I remember before going under the heavy anesthesia was weakly telling Brandon to take care of the farm. I should have seen the signs earlier. Looking back, they were all there, glaring like neon lights in a dark room. For months before my heart attack, Brandon had been drastically different. He had started rolling his eyes whenever I talked about the old days, making condescending comments about upgrading our lifestyle and monetizing the land. His wife, Chelsea, was significantly worse. She'd post on her Instagram account about our farm being a pathetic old dump, all while standing in my kitchen, eating my food. The disrespect started small and insidious. Take the family dinner back in April. Brandon interrupted me mid-sentence while I was telling a story. "Dad, you're 71, he sighed, running a hand through his expensive hair. "Time to let the younger generation handle things." "Handle what things?" I asked, setting my fork down. "Everything," he replied, not missing a beat. "The farm, the finances, the future." Chelsea nodded along enthusiastically, recording herself for her Instagram story. She had 15,000 followers hanging on her every word, about how they were finally moving forward and taking charge of their stubborn elder. I tried to explain to them that the farm wasn't about farming anymore, that there were other considerations, other investments. Brandon laughed. He laughed in my face. "Other investments? Dad, you drive a 2018 Ford pickup. You shop at Walmart. What investments? You're delusional." Chelsea chimed in from behind her glowing phone screen. "Babe, your dad's scared of change. Old people get like that." Old people. I was sitting right there. The second major sign came in May. I'd casually mentioned needing to fly to Seattle for a business meeting. Brandon's reaction was immediate and aggressive. "What business? Dad, you're retired. You grow corn and soybeans. You don't have business." But here's what made it so much worse. He didn't sell it, because he needed money for my medical care. My hospital bills totaled $127. I'd paid them myself in cash through my accountants to avoid burdening the family. He sold it to fund a luxury vacation. By June 25th, Brandon and Chelsea were posting endless Instagram stories from the Maldives. The Four Seasons Resort, $8,000 per night, swimming with dolphins, champagne breakfasts, sunset dinners on private beaches that cost more than most people make in a month. Chelsea's post from their overwater villa had the caption, "Finally living the life we deserve. Sometimes you have to take control of your own destiny. Blessed millionaire mindset, living my best life." She tagged the location, she tagged the resort. She even tagged the bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon, $350. While I was learning to walk again in grueling physical therapy, the math was simple. 6 weeks in the Maldives, first-class flights, 5-star accommodations, shopping sprees that Chelsea documented religiously. They'd burned through $96,000 in a month and a half. But that wasn't the real loss. The real loss was the absolute destruction of trust. The real loss was watching my son celebrate, erasing his family's legacy, while his father fought to survive on a ventilator. The real loss was knowing that if I'd died, he would have gotten away with it perfectly. I finally found out about the catastrophic sale on September 12th. I'd been home from the rehabilitation center for 4 days. I was looking through a pile of mail when I found a formal letter from Westfield Development Corporation. "Thank you for your recent land sale. Construction on Anderson Commons Shopping Center will begin October 1st. Anderson Commons, they were naming their concrete shopping center after our family, the family whose farm they erased. I called the bank immediately. The sale was legitimate. The power of attorney was properly executed. All signatures verified. I called Brandon. "Oh, that. His voice was casual, like he'd sold a used car instead of 4 generations of family history. Yeah, I handled that while you were sick. Figured it was time. Time for what? I asked, my voice freezing cold. Time to liquidate some assets, Dad. You nearly died. Someone had to be practical about our financial situation. Our financial situation, as if he'd been supporting me instead of the exact other way around. You sold the farm for $1.2 million exactly, he said. It's worth $3.8 million. According to who? Some outdated county assessor. Dad, I got fair market value. Westfield Development doesn't overpay for anything. He was right about that. Westfield Development was notoriously cheap. They specialized in buying undervalued rural properties from desperate families. What Brandon didn't know was exactly who owned Westfield Development. But that conversation would come later. For now, I needed to understand the scope of what he'd done. Where's the money, Brandon? Invested in our future. Chelsea and I made some strategic moves while you were recovering. Moves like 6 weeks in the Maldives was an investment strategy. I want to see the documentation, Dad. You're still recovering, he sighed patronizingly. Let me handle the business side of things. That phrase, let me handle things, the same phrase he'd used at dinner. The same phrase he'd used to justify taking control of my life while I was unconscious. He'd stolen from me, but more than that, he'd stolen my choice, my agency, my right to decide what happened to my own property. And he'd done it with a patronizing smile, calling it love. The stakes were clear now. This wasn't about the money. It was about whether family meant anything, whether respect existed, whether a man who'd worked his entire life had any right to control his own legacy. Brandon thought he'd won. He had no idea what he'd started. I called him back the next day. September 13th, 2 p.m. Brandon, we need to talk. Dad, I'm at work. Can this wait? He worked for Midwest Farm Supply as a regional sales manager. $78,000 a year selling tractors to farmers who worked their land. No, it can't wait. You sold my farm. Silence, then a heavy sigh. It's our farm, and yes, I handled that situation. You handled it. I didn't sign anything authorizing a sale. You signed the power of attorney for medical decisions and for financial decisions, too. Chelsea found a lawyer who explained everything. When someone's incapacitated, family has to step up. Chelsea found a lawyer, of course. She did. I wasn't incapacitated. I was unconscious. Same thing legally. It wasn't the same thing, but Brandon had clearly prepared for this exact conversation. You want to explain why you sold $3.8 million worth of land for $1.2 million? Where are you getting $3.8 million, Dad? That's fantasy numbers. The appraisal done 6 months ago. County appraisals aren't market value. He snapped. Look, I know this is hard, but someone had to make the tough decisions. Tough decisions? He was talking like he'd saved the family from bankruptcy instead of stealing from his father. What tough decisions? I have zero debt. The farm was profitable. Profitable. Brandon scoffed loudly. Dad, you made maybe $40,000 last year on crop yields. $40,000. He thought that was my only income. There are other considerations. What other considerations? Dad, I've seen your finances. You live on Social Security and whatever the corn brings in. That's not sustainable. He'd seen my finances, my farm finances, not my real finances. You had no right. I had power of attorney. I had every right. His voice was getting sharper. The Respectful Son Act was wearing thin. That power of attorney was strictly for emergency medical decisions. It was for everything. Chelsea made sure of that. There it was. Chelsea made sure. This wasn't Brandon's panicked idea. This was a highly calculated plan. Let me ask you something, son. Did you even read the contract before you signed it? What contract? The sale contract with Westfield Development. Of course I read it. I'm not stupid. Good. Then you know exactly who owns Westfield Development. A long pause followed, longer this time. Some development company. Does it matter? It matters to me. Why? I let the silence stretch, let him wonder. Dad, you're being paranoid, he stammered. This is exactly what I was worried about. You're not thinking clearly. Not thinking clearly. The same phrase Chelsea had used. The same phrase they'd probably practiced in the mirror. I'm thinking clearly. Are you? Because you sound confused. Look, I know change is hard for old people. Old people. There it was again. I'm not confused, Brandon, and I'm not stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. Brandon shouted defensively. You sold my land to travel with your wife. We didn't travel, he retorted, his voice tight. We invested in experiences. There's a difference. Invested in experiences. An $8,000 a night hotel room was suddenly an investment strategy now. You spent $96,000 in exactly 6 weeks, I stated flatly. How? How the hell do you know that? His voice cracked. Instagram, I said simply. Chelsea documented everything. She is a meticulous accountant of your stolen money. She documented our vacation. People post vacation photos, Dad. It's perfectly normal. People don't typically post the itemized receipts, Brandon. $350 champagne. $5,000 shopping sprees at designer boutiques. Private dolphin excursions. That's our private business. It instantly became my business when you used my money to pay for it. Your money, Dad, he sneered. That money came from the farm sale, the farm you couldn't physically manage anymore. Couldn't manage. Past tense, like I was already dead and buried in the ground. I managed that farm perfectly well for 40 years. And now it's time for someone else to manage things. Someone else. Meaning him. You honestly think you can manage better than me? I think I can manage more realistically. He yelled, the facade dropping. Dad, you were desperately holding on to a property you couldn't afford to maintain. Trying to farm land you were too old and frail to work. Living in a house that supposedly needed $50,000 in emergency repairs. I challenged. None of that was true. The house was impeccable. But it sounded good. It sounded remarkably reasonable. It sounded exactly like a caring, practical son making hard choices for a declining, aging father. The roof leaks, Brandon argued. The foundation has severe cracks. The entire electrical system is a fire hazard from the 1970s. He had obviously prepared this exhaustive list. Probably typed it up with Chelsea's direct supervision. And you somehow fixed all of these imaginary problems by immediately selling it to developers. I solved the problems by liquidating an asset that was rapidly becoming a liability. Liquidating an asset. He was talking like a slick business consultant, instead of a son who grew up playing in those fields. Whose asset was it exactly, Brandon? Yours, he snapped. But you weren't in a mental position to make rational long-term decisions. Rational decisions. According to his twisted logic, any decision that didn't involve immediately selling the farm for cash was irrational. And you were? I asked softly. Someone had to be, or someone desperately wanted to be. What's that supposed to mean? It means you wanted the money, Brandon. You wanted the lifestyle. I wanted security for all of us. Dad, you nearly died. What if you'd had another heart attack the next day? What if you'd needed expensive long-term care in a facility? What if the farm had sat empty for years, rotting away? What if? He was creating these hypothetical emergencies to legally and morally justify actual theft. But I didn't die, I reminded him coldly. But you could have. I could get hit by a stray bullet tomorrow. That doesn't give you the legal right to sell my truck today. This is different. How? Because you're not 25 anymore. He screamed into the phone. Because things happen to old people. Because someone has to plan for actual reality. Reality, his specific version of reality, a reality where I was too old, too sick, and too confused to control my own life or my own assets. You want to know about reality, son? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. I think I know plenty about reality, do you? Because here's a reality check for you. You didn't sell my farm. What are you talking about? You sold it to me. Absolute silence on the line. I could hear his shallow breathing. What? He finally whispered. Westfield Development Corporation. Go check the Delaware Incorporation papers. Dad, you're not making sense. You don't have a company. You don't know anything about corporate real estate. You're a farmer, am I? I could hear him shifting nervously on the other end of the line, his brain furiously working through the terrifying implications of what I had said. Prove it, old man, he spat, and there it was. The respectful mask finally ripped off, revealing the entitled, arrogant Brandon underneath. I will, I said quietly, and hung up. After I hung up the phone, I sat perfectly still in my kitchen for a long time. I sat there staring blankly at the same heavy oak table, where we'd eaten dinner as a family for 30 straight years. The same table where Brandon had done his high school homework. The table where I'd patiently taught him to play chess. The table where he'd looked me dead in the eye and called me a pathetic old man. I stood up and made coffee, real strong coffee, not the cheap instant stuff I usually drank to save time. I needed the caffeine. Then I walked down the hall to the part of the house Brandon had never once seen. My private office. Most people don't install heavy, locking doors inside their own residential homes. But I had always kept this specific room private, It was an old, ingrained habit from the chaotic early days when vicious corporate espionage was a real, daily concern. The lock wasn't a standard deadbolt. It was electronic, biometric, a fingerprint scanner I had personally installed back in 1998, the same year Agritech Innovations successfully went public. I pressed my thumb to the glowing green pad. The heavy locks clicked open, and I stepped inside. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd carefully left it before my devastating heart attack. The air was cool and heavily filtered. 3 high-powered computer workstations sat dormant. 2 secure satellite phones, fireproof filing cabinets, stuffed with sensitive international patent documents, complex SEC filings, and highly confidential corporate records. The walls were covered with framed newspaper clippings. Clippings I had never shown to a single living soul in Millbrook Valley. Local farmer invents revolutionary soil sensor. The Oregonian, March 15, 1987. Anderson's agricultural innovation secures military contract. Portland Business Journal, June 3, 1992. Agritech Innovations IPO raises $340 million. Wall Street Journal, October 12, 1998. The Invisible Billionaire, Thomas Anderson's Quiet Empire. Forbes, March 8, 2019. 40 grueling years of building something that Brandon couldn't possibly imagine because I'd shielded him from it. I desperately wanted him to make his own way in the world, to build his own personal success, to earn his own genuine respect without relying on a trust fund. Instead, he'd stolen mine. I picked up the secure phone on the primary desk, the one with a heavily encrypted, direct line straight to the executive suites in Seattle. "Maggie," I said when she answered. "It's Tom." Margaret Williams had been my loyal attorney for 26 years. She was a brilliant corporate law specialist, the relentless woman who had meticulously helped structure Agritech's aggressive expansion into 17 different countries. "Tom," she gasped, "my God, how are you feeling?" The board heard about the surgery. We were terrified. "I'm fine, Maggie, but I need you to do something specific for me. Name it. I need you to bypass protocol and reactivate my full executive authority at Agritech immediately. And I need certified copies of all Westfield development paperwork." There was a heavy pause on the line. "Westfield?" Maggie asked, confused. "Tom, that's one of our discrete shell companies. What do you need with Westfield paperwork?" "My idiot son sold my family farm to them." "Your son sold your farm to us. He forged a medical power of attorney, and he doesn't know it's us." Maggie let out a sharp bark of laughter. She laughed. "Oh, Tom, this is too good. What did he sell it for?" $1.2 million. Jesus, Tom, that prime property is worth $4 million. Easy. What was he thinking? He was thinking his old man was too senile and stupid to notice. And now, he's about to learn exactly who owns Westfield Development Corporation. "When do you want to detonate this?" she asked, her voice turning professional. "Soon, but I want it done perfectly right, publicly, with maximum witnesses. I love the way you think. Tom, what did you have in mind?" "There's a town council meeting on October 3rd. Westfield is supposedly scheduled to present their grand development plans for the new Anderson Commons shopping center." "Anderson Commons?" Maggie scoffed. "They're naming the strip mall after your family." The sheer irony is beautiful. "What do you need from me to make this legally airtight?" I asked. "Everything: incorporation documents, ownership structure flowcharts, SEC filings proving ownership. And I want to be there. I wouldn't miss this good. Because he called me an old man today." "Twice." "Well," Maggie said, a dangerous edge to her voice. "He's about to meet an angry, wealthy old man." After I hung up the phone, I opened my primary laptop. Password protected, biometrically encrypted, directly connected to Agritech's heavily fortified private network. 847 active patents, 84 international corporate offices, 2,400 global employees, current market valuation, $485 million, all of it built from one single invention, one brilliant soil sensor that could precisely analyze crop yields, mineral content, and deep moisture levels in real time. I'd spent 40 years turning that sensor into an unstoppable empire. But I'd intentionally lived like a poor farmer because deep down in my bones, I was a farmer. The corporate business was business. The farm was my home, until Brandon arrogantly sold it. Now the business was personal. I opened my email client, 43 urgent unread messages from the Seattle office. Board meeting requests, aggressive acquisition proposals, quarterly reports desperately waiting for my final approval. I'd been away for 3 months. The company had continued running flawlessly without me, because that's exactly how I'd structurally built it. But my digital signature still mattered. My approval still carried immense weight. My 73% controlling ownership stake still meant I controlled everything. Brandon truly thought he'd sold the farm to some random, faceless commercial development company. He'd sold it directly to me, and he was about to find out what that meant in the most painful way possible. The town council meeting was officially scheduled for October 3rd, 7 p.m. sharp at the Millbrook Valley Community Center. I hadn't originally planned to attend, but then my home phone rang. "Mr. Anderson, this is Sandra Mitchell from the town council office." "Yes, Sandra, we understand you recently sold your farm to Westfield Development." "That's correct. Well, Westfield has formally requested to present their development plans at tonight's meeting for the Anderson Commons Shopping Center. We thought you might want to be there. I'll be there," I confirmed. "Great. Oh, and Mr. Anderson, your son Brandon called. He said he'd be presenting on behalf of the family." "On behalf of the family? Of course he would. He needed the spotlight. He needed the public validation." I arrived early, around 7:15 p.m. The Warren Community Center held about 85 people when packed tightly. Tonight it was about half full. Local farmers, small business owners, town council members. The usual crowd for development presentations. Brandon was already there, sitting in the front row, wearing his absolute best suit. A sharp navy blue that probably cost him a full month's salary. Chelsea was sitting right beside him, holding a tripod and live streaming everything for her eager Instagram followers. "Good evening, Millbrook Valley," she chirped enthusiastically into her glowing phone screen. "We're here at the town council meeting, where my brilliant husband is about to present some exciting news about our family's contribution to the community." Our family's contribution. She was expertly spinning the theft and sale as a grand act of charity. I quietly took a seat in the back row. Brandon didn't see me come in. Council Chairman Pete Morrison tapped his microphone and called the chaotic meeting to order. "First item tonight is the Westfield Development presentation regarding the proposed Anderson Commons Shopping Center. Brandon Anderson will present on behalf of the family." Brandon stood up, looking confident, polished, and ready to take full public credit for selling his father's legacy. "Thank you, Chairman Morrison, council members, fellow citizens," he began smoothly. He'd clearly practiced this speech, probably with Chelsea coaching his hand gestures. Tonight represents a bold new chapter for Millbrook Valley. A chapter where we finally embrace necessary progress, instead of stubbornly clinging to the past. Clinging to the past, that was me he was talking about. For 4 generations, the Anderson family has farmed 520 acres on the east side of town. Good land, productive land, but farming alone isn't enough anymore. It isn't sustainable. According to who? My father, Tom Anderson, spent his entire life working that land. But at 71, after a serious heart attack, he recognized that it was time for a change. He recognized, like I'd made the decision myself while sipping tea on the porch. So we made the difficult choice to sell the property to Westfield Development Corporation. Not for personal gain, but for community benefit. Not for personal gain. Tell that to the luxury bartender in the Maldives. Anderson Commons will bring jobs to our town, retail opportunities, economic growth, a legacy that serves everyone instead of one family. The crowd was nodding along. It sounded fantastic, progressive, forward-thinking. Chelsea was recording everything, whispering breathless commentary to her phone. "So proud of my husband for making these tough decisions." Brandon continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "This wasn't an easy choice. Selling family land never is. But sometimes we have to think beyond ourselves. Think beyond ourselves, like spending 96 grand on a vacation, was thinking beyond himself. I know some people might question whether this was the right decision. Whether an old farmer should have let go of his life's work. An old farmer, there it was again. But I want to assure everyone that this decision was made with full family consent and careful consideration. My father may not be here tonight, but he supports this development 100%. Full family consent, that was it? I stood up, my boots hitting the floor loudly. I said, my voice cutting through the room like a gunshot. "Your father is here." The entire room went dead quiet. Brandon spun around at the podium, his face going terrifyingly white. "Dad," he whispered, his confident voice vanishing. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here," I said loudly, "listening to you lie." Chelsea's live stream captured everything. Her phone was still running, and her follower count was probably spiking astronomically. as the carefully constructed PR event rapidly devolved into a brutal family drama. Chairman Morrison looked panicked, his eyes darting between me and Brandon. "Mr. Anderson, would you like to address the council?" "I would," I said loudly, stepping out from the back row and walking down the center aisle. Brandon was still standing frozen at the podium, gripping the edges like a lifeline. "Move aside, son," I ordered. He moved. I faced the crowd, 85 people watching, Chelsea's phone still recording every second. "My name is Thomas Anderson," I announced clearly into the microphone. "I own the farm my son told you about." I paused, owned past tense, because while I was unconscious in the hospital, fighting to stay alive, he sold it. Murmurs erupted from the crowd. This was not what they'd expected. "My son stood up here and told you this decision was made with full family consent." "That is false. He forged a power of attorney document and sold my property without my knowledge or permission." Brandon finally found his voice, stepping forward, his hands raised. "Dad, you're confused. Your medication. We discussed this. We discussed it after you'd already sold it. Brandon, you signed the papers." He shouted desperately. "I signed a medical power of attorney, not financial." Chairman Morrison was looking between us like he was watching a tennis match. "Gentlemen, perhaps this is a family matter that should be discussed privately." "No," I said firmly, refusing to yield the floor. "This is exactly where it should be discussed. Publicly, with witnesses." I turned to Brandon. "You want to tell these good people what you got for my farm? You want to talk about fair market value?" We got fair market value," Brandon stammered. "How much, Brandon?" "Dad, the specific numbers aren't." "1.2 million, I said into the microphone. "For 520 acres of prime agricultural land." The crowd was seriously stirring now. Any farmer in that room knew that was cheap, even by rural Oregon standards. It was a complete fire sale. "And you want to tell them what you did with that money?" I demanded. Brandon's jaw was tight. He looked trapped. "We invested it in various opportunities." "Specifically, Brandon, tell them about your community investments, Dad. This isn't the place." 6 weeks in the Maldives," I announced to the shocked room. $8,000 per night, dolphin tours, designer shopping sprees, champagne that costs more than most people make in a day. Chelsea had finally stopped live streaming. She lowered her phone, her face pale, realizing the nightmare was public. Brandon tried to regain control. "My father is still recovering from major surgery. He's not thinking clearly about complex financial decisions." "I'm thinking clearly," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Are you? Because you seem to be making accusations for a man who committed fraud." "I'm stating facts. You stole my farm. You lied to this council. And you're standing there taking credit for community service when all you did was fund your vacation. Dad, you're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I leaned against the podium. "Let me ask you something, son. In front of all these people, do you know who owns Westfield Development Corporation?" Brandon's face went pale again. Some development company." "Which development company? Who is the parent corporation?" "I don't know. It doesn't matter who owns it." "It matters to me," I said coldly. "Because I want these people to know exactly who you sold my farm to." "Dad, stop. Who owns Westfield Development, Brandon?" "I don't know," he yelled. "You don't know," I repeated softly, letting the microphone pick up the devastation in my voice. "You sold 520 acres of family land to a company you know nothing about." The crowd was silent now. The tension was palpable. Even Chelsea had put her phone down entirely. "You want to know who owns Westfield Development Corporation?" I asked him. "Dad, please, I do." The words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon stared at me, uncomprehending. "What?" "I own Westfield Development Corporation," I said clearly. 73% controlling stake, incorporated in Delaware, 2019. That's impossible," he whispered. "Is it?" I asked with a cold smirk. "You sold my farm to my company, son, for a third of what it's worth." Brandon looked like he'd been hit by a freight train. He staggered back slightly. "You're lying, am I?" I turned back to the stunned crowd. "I'd like to introduce someone who can legally verify exactly what I'm telling you." The community center double doors opened with a dramatic thud. Maggie Williams walked in carrying her heavy leather briefcase. She looked like a corporate assassin. "This is Margaret Williams, General Counsel for Agritech Innovations," I announced. Maggie strode to the front, professional and lethal. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of watermarked documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maggie said loudly, I have here the official incorporation papers for Westfield Development Corporation, subsidiary of Agritech Innovations. She pointed to the paperwork. Thomas Anderson, majority shareholder. The room exploded in shocked whispers. People were leaning forward, trying to see the papers. Brandon was still staring at me, his reality collapsing. You're a farmer, I'm a lot of things, son, but you drive a pickup truck. You shop at Walmart, yes I do. You live in the same drafty house that my great-grandfather built. Yes, it's a good house, but how did a simple farmer build a $485 million technology company? His mouth opened, but nothing else came out. He was shattered. That's a conversation for another time, Brandon, I said firmly. Right now, we have a more immediate problem. What problem? He whispered. You committed financial fraud, and you did it in front of 85 witnesses. The community center was dead silent again. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Brandon was standing there like a statue, his brain desperately trying to process the magnitude of his error. Chelsea had gone white, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Chairman Morrison cleared his throat loudly. Mr. Anderson, which Mr. Anderson should I be addressing? The one who owns the property, I replied. Maggie stepped forward, documents in hand, projecting pure corporate authority. 26 years of corporate law had taught her how to violently command a room. If I may, Chairman Morrison, she said, I'd like to present some documentation for the public record. She spread the papers across the presentation table. These are the incorporation documents for Westfield Development Corporation, filed in Delaware on March 15, 2019. As you can see, Westfield is a wholly owned subsidiary of Agritech Innovations. More murmurs from the crowd, and this, Maggie continued, pulling out another binder, is the shareholder registry for Agritech Innovations. Thomas Anderson holds 73% of all voting shares, making him the controlling owner of both companies. She looked up at Brandon, her eyes cold, which means, when you fraudulently sold your father's farm to Westfield Development, you essentially sold it to your father. But that's Brandon started, then stopped. That's impossible. Which part is impossible? I asked, that I own the companies, or that you sold it to me. You're a dirt farmer, he cried out. I am a farmer. I'm also the founder and majority shareholder of Agritech Innovations, a company that develops agricultural technology for farmers worldwide. Maggie pulled out another document from her briefcase. Perhaps this will help clarify things. She held up a pristine copy of Forbes magazine, March 2019 issue, the cover story, The Invisible Billionaire, Thomas Anderson's Quiet Empire. She opened the magazine and started reading aloud to the room. Thomas Anderson prefers overalls to Armani, pickup trucks to private jets, and small-town Oregon to Silicon Valley. But don't let the humble exterior fool you. This 71-year-old farmer has quietly built one of America's most successful agricultural technology companies. Brandon lunged forward and grabbed the magazine, staring at his father's picture on page 42. He looked like a man drowning. Current net worth $485 million, Maggie continued seamlessly. Built from a single patent for an automated soil analysis system, Agritech Innovations now operates in 17 countries and holds over 800 patents in agricultural technology. The crowd was buzzing now. People were pulling out their smartphones, rapidly Googling Agritech Innovations. Chelsea finally found her voice, though it was shrill and desperate. This is fake. You're making this all up to scare us. Maggie smiled a terrifying smile. Would you like to see the audited SEC filings, Mrs. Anderson? The federal tax records? The international patent documents? She opened her briefcase wider, revealing stacks of undeniable proof. I brought everything, including the original patent filed by Thomas Anderson in 1987. Patent number US 107892334. Automated soil analysis system, the same system, I added loudly, that Agritech has been licensing to John Deere, Casey Sage and New Holland for the past 15 years. Brandon was still staring at the Forbes article. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the net worth printed on the page. But you drive a 2018 Ford pickup. It gets good gas mileage, Brandon. You shop at Walmart. They have good prices. You live in a house from 1924. It's a structurally sound house. My great-grandfather built it to last, but why? He pleaded, tears finally forming in his eyes. That was the crucial question. The question that mattered more than the money, or the shell companies, or the patents. Because I'm a farmer, Brandon, I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. That's what I've always been. The technology company exists for one reason: to serve farmers. To make their extremely difficult lives easier. To help them grow better crops with less backbreaking effort. I looked around the room at the weathered faces of my neighbors. They understood I didn't build agritech to get filthy rich. I built it to solve real problems. When I invented that soil sensor in 1987, it was because I was tired of guessing about soil quality and losing entire harvests. I wanted hard data, I wanted real information, but $485 million, Chelsea whispered, looking physically sick, is the direct result of helping farmers make vastly better decisions for 37 years, I told her. Every single patent, every product, every innovation was designed to make farming more efficient. Maggie pulled out a single sheet of paper. The company's formal mission statement, written by Thomas Anderson in 1987, to provide farmers with the technological tools they need to feed the world sustainably and profitably. I never changed that mission, I said to the crowd. I never permanently moved to Seattle. I never stopped farming. I never stopped living exactly like a farmer. Because 90% of agritech's profits are reinvested directly back into research and development. Chairman Morrison was shaking his head in sheer disbelief. Mr. Anderson, with all due respect, why didn't anyone know about this? Because I didn't want them to know, Pete, I answered honestly. The absolute moment people find out you have serious money, they treat you differently. They stop seeing you as a farmer or a neighbor and start seeing you as a walking bank account. I looked directly at Brandon. Case in point, Dad. Brandon choked out. If I'd known, if you'd known what? You would have treated me with actual respect. He cried out. You would have valued my opinion. You would have asked permission before selling my property. I would have. You would have what, Brandon? Respected me, loved me, treated me like actual family. The room was deathly quiet again. This was getting personal now. You sat at my table and called me a pathetic old man. I growled, taking a step toward him. You said I was too confused and senile to make basic financial decisions. You stole my entire life's work to pay for your luxury vacation. Dad, I didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. You never listened. You arrogantly assumed that because I choose to wear overalls and drive a pickup truck, I must be poor, ignorant, and stupid. Chelsea was actively crying now, quietly but visibly, her mascara running down her face. You want to know the real, unforgivable tragedy here? I continued, my voice echoing in the large room. It's not that you sold the farm, it's not even that you stole my money, it's that you did it all, while genuinely thinking you were smarter than me. Brandon was looking down at his expensive leather shoes. Dad, I'm so sorry, are you? I asked coldly, are you truly sorry you stole from me, or are you sorry you got caught stealing from a billionaire? I'm sorry I made a terrible mistake. A mistake? Brandon. Fraud isn't a mistake, it's a calculated felony. That got his attention instantly. His head snapped up. Fraud? Maggie stepped forward again, closing the distance between them. Falsifying a medical power of attorney document for financial gain is fraud in the first degree under Oregon law. Selling property without proper legal authorization is theft in the first degree. Both are Class B felonies, carrying mandatory prison time. But the lawyer said. Brandon stammered. What lawyer? Maggie asked mockingly. Brandon looked at Chelsea. She was still crying, unable to speak. Some lawyer Chelsea found online. He said the power of attorney covered financial decisions. Did you show this alleged lawyer the actual physical document? Maggie demanded. I know, Chelsea handled that part. Maggie smiled, a predatory expression. Well, I've personally reviewed the actual document. Brandon, it explicitly, in bold print, limits your authority to emergency medical decisions only. Financial decisions require a separate, notarized addendum. But the bank accepted it, Brandon yelled desperately. The bank made a catastrophic underwriting error, Maggie informed him flatly. They've already been notified by my office. They're currently conducting their own internal investigation. Chairman Morrison was looking overwhelmed by the legal bombshells. So what happens now? I looked at Brandon, my son, the boy I had patiently taught to drive a tractor, the man who had ruthlessly stolen my life's work. That depends on Brandon, I said. What do you mean? He asked, terrified. He has some extremely difficult choices to make right now. He can cooperate with the legal process, make full restitution, and try to cautiously rebuild some trust. Or he can continue pretending he's the victim here, Dad, I never meant. You meant to sell my farm, without my permission. You meant to take the money and spend it on yourself. You meant to stand up and lie to this town council about family consent. But I thought you were going to die. Brandon sobbed loudly. I thought I was protecting our family's interests. By stealing from your family? I asked in disgust. By securing our financial future. Our financial future, I repeated, shaking my head. Brandon, you work for Midwest Farm Supply. You make $78,000 a year. Before today, that was your entire complete connection to our financial future. The number hit him like a physical slap across the face. He'd probably never told anyone his exact salary, preferring to project wealth. Now I continued, delivering the killing blow. You're unemployed. What? Agritech Innovations holds a 31% controlling interest in Midwest Farm Supply. As of today, your employment is terminated with extreme prejudice. You can't do that. I did. Maggie casually pulled out her phone. I personally sent the termination notice to their HR department an hour ago. Your email is locked. Brandon stared at her, then turned his horrified gaze back to me. You're violently destroying my life. I'm not destroying anything, son, I said, my voice devoid of pity. I'm ruthlessly revealing what you built, what I built. A pathetic house of cards built on theft, lies, and disrespect. It was always going to violently fall down. I chose when. The room was silent now. Even Chelsea had stopped her frantic crying. The brutal reality of their situation had finally crashed down upon them like a collapsing roof. So what happens next? Brandon asked, his voice hollow, defeated. Next, I said, my tone uncompromising. You are going to learn exactly what real consequences look like. I turned away from him, addressing Chairman Morrison and the stunned council members. Before we proceed any further, I'd like to make a formal declaration to this council and to everyone here. The crowd waited with bated breath. Westfield Development Corporation will not be building the Anderson Commons Shopping Center. The entire development project is cancelled, effective immediately. What? Chelsea shrieked, her voice cracking in pure panic. The development is dead, I repeated firmly. Brandon surged forward. You can't do that. There are signed contracts, legal obligations. You'll be sued for millions in breach of contract. Maggie casually snapped her heavy briefcase shut. Brandon, there are zero legal obligations. As any competent lawyer would know, commercial real estate sale contracts contain 10-day due diligence and review period. That period expires tomorrow at noon. What does that mean for the town? Chairman Morrison asked, looking utterly bewildered. It means, Maggie explained with a predatory grin, that Agritech Innovations is officially exercising its legal right to cancel the purchase agreement without penalty. But the money, Brandon stuttered, his eyes wide with absolute terror. If you cancel the sale, the money has to be returned to Westfield Development. Which means it goes back to Agritech. Which means it goes right back to me. I finished for him. I looked at my son, watching the horrific realization dawn on his face. The $2 million you stole, Brandon? You still owe it. That debt didn't magically disappear. His face went from pale to a sickly shade of green. My debt? I didn't steal it, I sold the land. You sold property that wasn't legally yours to sell. You spent money that wasn't yours to spend. Criminal law calls that felony theft. Civil law calls it conversion and damages. But I don't have $2 million. He cried out in despair. I am well aware of that, I replied coldly. That is your problem. Chelsea practically threw herself forward, her mascara smeared across her cheeks. But we already spent it. We can't give it back. Yes, you did, I agreed, nodding slowly. You spent $96,000 on a 6-week luxury vacation. Let's talk about the rest of it. Where is the other $1 million plus? Brandon? He was quiet for a long, agonizing moment. Investments, he mumbled. Speak up, I demanded sharply. What kind of investments? Chelsea started a consulting business. We needed significant startup capital. We had to invest in her brand, a consulting business, I repeated flatly. I looked at Chelsea, who was desperately trying to avoid my gaze. What exactly kind of consulting do you do, Chelsea? Social media marketing, Brandon answered for her, his voice shaking. Influencer strategy, building brand awareness for corporate clients. I nodded thoughtfully. I see. And how many corporate clients does this highly funded agency currently have? It's still in the early stages of development. How many actual paying clients, Brandon? I roared, demanding the truth. 0, he whispered, staring at the floor. 0 clients, I echoed, addressing the room. She spent over $1 million of my money on a fake business with 0 clients. It takes capital to build a luxury brand. Chelsea screamed defensively. You have to spend money to make money. It takes customers to genuinely build a business, I corrected her. You wanted a slush fund to buy designer clothes and pretend you were important. Maggie was writing diligently on a legal pad. For the official record, spending misappropriated funds on highly speculative, unverified investments does nothing to reduce your civil liability. Meaning what? Chelsea snapped. Meaning, Maggie smiled warmly, you both still owe Thomas Anderson $2 million, plus interest, plus damages. Whether you spent it wisely on stocks or foolishly on fake businesses is irrelevant to the court. I turned my attention back to Brandon. But that is merely the civil side of the equation. We haven't even discussed the criminal side. Criminal. Brandon choked on the word. Fraud in the first degree. Theft in the first degree. Uttering a forged instrument. Those are severe, life-altering felonies. Son, Dad, please, you're not going to press criminal charges against your own flesh and blood. Aren't I? The question hung in the air, heavy and lethal. You stole my life's work, Brandon. You forged my signature while I was struggling on a ventilator. You lied to federal banking institutions. You committed severe crimes against me, but I'm family. Family doesn't send family to prison. And family doesn't steal from family while they are fighting for their life in an ICU. I countered instantly. I didn't make these choices, Brandon. You did, multiple times, over multiple days. This was not a fleeting moment of weakness. This was a highly calculated, meticulously executed plan. Chelsea was frantically scrolling through her phone again, likely trying to mass delete her incriminating Instagram posts. It won't matter, I told her, my voice laced with pure disgust. The internet is forever. My corporate tech team captured and archived every single post, every timestamp, every geotag of you spending stolen money. Screenshots are forever. She looked up at me, pure unadulterated hatred in her eyes. I didn't know it was stolen. He told me it was an inheritance advance. You helped him plan it, I said, remembering their hushed conversation in the kitchen. I was helping my husband make financial decisions for his family's future. His family? I laughed bitterly. You have been married for 2 short years. I built that farm over 40 years of blood and sweat. But you decided I couldn't manage it anymore. I looked around the room. 85 of my neighbors were quietly watching my family disintegrate in public. This is exactly what happens when unchecked greed meets stupidity, I announced to the crowd. When pure entitlement violently crashes into reality. When you severely underestimate the wrong person, Chairman Morrison, looking thoroughly exhausted, spoke up. Mr. Anderson, Tom, what are your exact intentions regarding the property? The farm is going right back to farming, Pete. The development plans are permanently cancelled. Westfield Development will be legally required to restore the land to its exact original condition, at their own expense. But what about the town's development needs? The jobs? Talk to me in a year, I said. When this legal nightmare is properly settled, maybe we can discuss real sustainable development. Development that serves this community, instead of lining the pockets of greedy developers and thieving children. Brandon was desperately staring at me, a broken shell of a man. Dad, what do you want me to do? I want you to finally face the severe consequences of your abhorrent choices. What consequences? He whimpered pathetically. The criminal charges will be formally filed by my legal team tomorrow morning at 9:00 a.m. sharp. A civil lawsuit for damages will be filed by the end of the week. For how much? He asked, terrified of the answer. $2.6 million, Maggie answered for me, her tone clinical. 2.6? Brandon shrieked. The sale was only for 1.2. The fraudulent sale was for 1.2, I corrected. The actual legally appraised value of the stolen asset is 3.8. The difference is 2.6 million. That is the exact amount of my financial damages. But I don't have $2.6 million. I know that. I don't have any money left at all. I know that too, so what happens to me? He begged. Asset forfeiture, Maggie listed cheerfully. Wage garnishment for the rest of your natural life. Complete utter bankruptcy, total seizure of all personal property, whatever it takes to collect what you owe, Mr. Anderson. Chelsea dropped her phone. It clattered loudly on the wooden floor. What about our house? We have a mortgage. Then it depends on how much equity you have, I said coldly. If there's any left after the bank takes its cut, it belongs to me. What about my business? You don't have a business, Chelsea. You have a shiny website and a rapidly defunct Instagram account. It's over. The horrific reality was finally sinking into their bones. They had no money, no income, no assets, and zero future. But they had debts, crushing, life-altering debts. However, I forcefully continued, letting a tiny sliver of hope re-enter the chaotic room. There is one potential option. Brandon looked up, his tear-streaked face desperate. Anything, please, Dad. Anything. Full, unconditional cooperation with the police and the criminal investigation. Complete, transparent financial disclosure of every single penny you spent. Public, humiliating acknowledgement of your crimes. And restitution. What kind of restitution? Brandon asked warily. Community service, 1,000 hours of grueling manual labor at local farms in this county. You are going to learn what actual backbreaking work truly looks like. 20 hours a week for 50 weeks. You will learn farming from the dirt up, and if you do that, and you don't complain once, I said I will consider cautiously reducing the civil damages lawsuit down to your actual, proven cash expenses, the $96,000 you spent in the Maldives, plus the legal fees to violently reverse the sale. And the criminal charges? That is up to the district attorney. But your full cooperation might convince them to offer a plea deal for severely reduced charges instead of maximum prison time. Brandon hopelessly looked at Chelsea. She was staring blankly at the wall, catatonic. Dad, we don't have $96,000 either to pay you back. Then you will enthusiastically make monthly payments, I said mercilessly. For as long as it takes, 10 years, 20 years, I don't care, Dad. This is my entire life you're talking about ruining. It is the exact life you actively chose, son, I said, my voice hard as granite. You chose this life the absolute second you picked up that pen and forged my name to ruthlessly steal my home. I forcefully turned away from him and addressed Chairman Morrison. Pete, I sincerely apologize for disrupting your council meeting tonight with my family's ugly business. But I desperately needed this community to understand exactly what happened here. Straight from the source. No apology necessary, Tom, the chairman said, shaking his head. This has been illuminating. I looked at Brandon one final time. He looked small, pathetic, and defeated. You have exactly until tomorrow morning to actively decide, Brandon. The severe criminal charges get formally filed at 9 a.m. With or without your active cooperation, Dad, please. Do not call me Dad, I growled, pointing a thick finger directly at him. You permanently lost the right to use that word when you sold my farm to buy a vacation. I violently turned my back on him and actively walked toward the heavy exit doors. Maggie efficiently gathered her towering stacks of legal documents, loudly snapped her briefcase shut, and actively followed closely behind me. As I forcefully pushed the heavy doors open to leave, the last sound I heard echoing in the silent community center was Chelsea's shrill, panicked voice. What the hell are we going to do now? I let the heavy door swing shut behind me. That wasn't my problem anymore. The story exploded in the local press exactly 3 days later. The front page of the Oregonian ran the headline, Billionaire Farmer Halts Son's $1 million land fraud. It was printed directly above the fold, complete with a highly unflattering mugshot of Brandon and a beautiful drone shot of our family farm. The investigative reporter had done a phenomenal job. She had interviewed Shocktown council members, pulled the unsealed corporate records, and somehow managed to get her hands on screenshots of Chelsea's deleted Instagram posts from the Maldives. The photos looked pathetic, printed in black and white newspaper ink. Flexing with $350 champagne and swimming with dolphins while your father was on life support didn't read as glamorous. It read as sociopathic. Brandon was officially arrested on the morning of October 4th. He was charged with fraud in the first degree, theft in the first degree, and falsifying legal documents. The district attorney, eager for a high-profile win, added severe felony conspiracy charges after reviewing the extensive evidence of Chelsea's involvement in planning the scheme. His bail was set at $50,000 cash. He couldn't make it. He spent his first 3 nights in a cold county jail cell. Desperate, Chelsea tried to start a GoFundMe campaign titled, Help Brandon Anderson, Victim of a Vicious Family Legal Conflict. It managed to raise exactly $237 before GoFundMe shut it down for violating their terms of service regarding criminal fraud. The story didn't stop at the state line. Local television picked it up, followed quickly by CNN and Fox News. By the end of the week, the hashtag billionaire farmer versus greedy son was trending globally on Twitter. Chelsea's Instagram follower count skyrocketed overnight from 15,000 to nearly 50,000. But they weren't fans, they were digital rubberneckers actively following her, purely for the morbid entertainment value of watching her perfectly curated life spectacularly implode in slow motion. She tried to monetize the sudden infamy, posting videos about creating authentic lifestyle content from a real family crisis. Brands ran away screaming, authentic or not, being implicated in a felony fraud investigation wasn't a good look for corporate sponsors. Faced with a mountain of undeniable evidence, Brandon officially pled guilty on November 15th. The prosecutor, true to their word regarding his cooperation, had offered a strict plea deal. He received 5 years of heavily monitored probation, the mandatory 1,000 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full financial restitution. In exchange, he avoided state prison. He took the deal without hesitation. Chelsea filed for divorce exactly 2 weeks later, citing irreconcilable differences and severe emotional distress. She fought tooth and nail to keep her expensive engagement ring. I made sure my legal team stripped Brandon of everything else. The farm was fully restored by December 1st. Westfield Development Corporation, operating under my direct orders, was required to remove every single survey marker, engineering stake, and construction permit. The restoration process cost the company $47. I intentionally hired 3 local Millbrook Valley contracting companies to do the work, pumping the money right back into the local economy. At the December meeting, the town council formally apologized to me. I accepted it graciously. I harbored no hard feelings toward them. They had been lied to, like everyone else. In late December, Agritech Innovations established the Anderson Agricultural Scholarship Fund with a $2 million initial endowment. It provided full-ride university scholarships for local farm kids who wanted to study agricultural technology and engineering. The first recipient was Sarah Mitchell, Chairman Morrison's bright 18-year-old granddaughter. She was a straight-A student and a proud 4-H champion who dreamed of studying ag engineering at Oregon State. I attended her award ceremony personally, wearing my best pair of denim overalls. Brandon began his court-ordered community service in the freezing rain of January. He was assigned 20 hours a week at the Hendrickson family farm, located 5 miles south of town. Old Man Hendrickson, a man who didn't tolerate any laziness, put him straight to work. Brandon spent his days mucking out filthy stalls, hauling feed to angry cattle in the mud, and repairing barbed wire fence lines in the biting cold. It was brutal, manual labor, real farming. There was no air conditioning, no corporate expense account, and no Instagram photo opportunities. Endless, exhausting work. My civil case against him settled in February. Brandon agreed to pay $96. Zero in direct restitution. We established a strict payment plan. $500 automatically drafted from his account every single month for the next 16 years. To pay his debts, he managed to get a job at the local feed store. He made minimum wage, spending 8 hours a day loading 50-pound bags of grain and fertilizer onto pickup trucks. It was hard, honest work. The first honest work he had done in years. I saw him there once. In early March, I had pulled up to buy premium seed for the spring planting season. He looked different. He was thinner, his expensive haircut replaced by a cheap buzz cut. His hands were calloused and blistered. He looked older. He looked humbler. He saw my truck pull up. He paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead. Then he simply nodded at me. I nodded back. We didn't exchange a single word. He loaded the heavy seed bags into the back of my truck without a single complaint. He carried the bags himself, treating me with the quiet, distant respect of a worker serving a customer, rather than a son trying to con a mark. It was progress, small but real. Today the farm is thriving, producing better than ever. The fields are rich with corn, soybeans, and winter wheat, the exact same crops my great-grandfather grew on this soil a century ago. The only difference is that Agritech's latest, most advanced soil sensors are embedded throughout the property, providing real-time agronomic data directly to my servers. The technology serves the farming exactly like it should, exactly like it always has. People in town occasionally ask me if I have forgiven him. It is the wrong question to ask. Forgiveness isn't about simply forgetting the past or pretending a betrayal didn't happen. True forgiveness is about accepting the brutal reality of what happened and then consciously choosing how you are going to move forward. Brandon consciously chose to steal from his family. He chose the path of lies, greed, and disrespect. I chose to hold him accountable. I chose truth. And I chose consequences. Those weren't emotional, vindictive choices. They were necessary, practical ones. Because respect is never inherited, and it can never be demanded. It must be earned through action. And family blood does not give you a free pass to steal from the people who love you. Brandon is finally learning that lesson now. He is learning it the absolute hardest way possible. But he is learning, maybe in 10 years, when he has finally finished paying off his crushing restitution, when he has completed every hour of his community service, when he truly understands what a hard day of honest work feels like in his bones. Maybe, then we can sit down and have a different kind of conversation. Maybe we can slowly start to rebuild something real between us. But if we do, it won't be built on a foundation of unearned money, assumed inheritance, or blind family obligation. It will be built on respect, mutual hard-earned respect, because at the end of the day, that is the only kind of respect that lasts. Have you ever had a family member take advantage of your trust and kindness? Let me know your story in the comments, and tell me where you're listening from. Because sometimes, the hardest and most painful lessons we ever learn come directly from the people closest to us.